All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about what would we do. So tonight we're going to be talking about what would we do with the if we need a plan for alien first contact. I'm going to read that by Tamla McGee. All right now, humans are still searching for signs of intelligent alien life on other planets, but how would we react towards it if we ever did make contact? According to many of our cultural touchstones, there's only one thing for it if extraterrestrials ever take a cosmic detour to our planet: heavy artillery fire. Heavy artillery fire. But from the sugary 1980s blockbuster E.T. to Extraterrestrial, the decades of Star Trek episodes, to the books of Isaac Asimov and Ursula K. Le Guin, science fiction writers have long wrangled with the question: how would we really treat them in popular culture? How would we treat the aliens them? In popular culture, extraterrestrials are often cast as second-class citizens or less than human. If it weren't for their intervention of ETs, 2009 film District 9, of millions of aliens. I remember this. Were transferred to Earth through a spaceship, and I forgot how they got here, but they were here. It was actually like a slave ship, a slave spaceship, and they came from a different galaxy, and I guess they, you know, were basically slave aliens sent to Earth, and they were put into a shanty town, like a shanty town, where a shanty town is actually like a town that's basically where poor people can stay, but it's basically a place, a town, junk, trash. Your home is created with trash, and there's garbage everywhere. Anyway, they claim to Earth. Um, they look like giant, like crayfish mixed with centipedes. It's a great movie though, District 9. But they were, fortunately, there was no giant battle or anything. They were mistreated, but still, they were in their shanty town, and the humans were in their town. We kept divided. Um, so I guess that's better than us going to a massive war. Anyway, um, let's see. Hmm. All right, so there's a thing. We'll talk about the Drake equation, but not right now. Um, Now, as this the writer of this said, Tamla McGee said, it reminds me of exoplanets. As a young researcher, it was a topic we talked about. We all suspected exoplanets were out there, but there was no way that we'd ever find one because it was technically far too difficult. We know exoplanets are out there, and some are even potential candidates for life because they host water. So, with the search ongoing for alien life and the possibility remaining that we encounter it, it's not amiss to consider how we might react if we ever did make contact, especially considering an intelligent alien species is likely to be very different to our own human one. Non human rights. Writers don't seem to have too much hope that humans would treat aliens very well. Perhaps that's because our track record of affording rights to the inhabitants of this planet, human or otherwise, has been so poor throughout history despite the international legal conventions supposedly safeguarding them. The grantee of inalienable universal rights, that is, the rights guaranteed to all people, no matter what, we enshrine by the international community into law through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 after the horrors of World War II. However, exceptions for sanctions that are limited means to enforce these rights, even for humans. While these laws state that people are supposed to have rights like liberty and freedom from enslavement afforded to each of us from the birth to death, some political philosophers have suggested that in practice, these only really exist on paper. A clue for how we might treat aliens we ever do have contact with may lie in the rights we've afforded non human species on our planet. Although many countries now recognize animals ranging from gorillas to crows as sentient, it's only recently that animal rights groups have made some legal headway in affording rights to animals based on these sentences, loosely defined as their ability to experience comfort or distress. We search the universe to discover ourselves because it forces us to reflect back on how we relate to each other, how we relate to our environment, how we relate to other species and people. That was said by Jill Stewart. Anyway, some ethicists are already considering how the rights of completely unfamiliar alien species would fit into our legal and ethical frameworks. But there's been little in the way of open international discussion around aliens. A question was raised at the United Nations General Assembly session in 1977 by the Prime Minister of Grenada, Eric M. Gary, who believed UFO sightings may have been signs of hostile extraterrestrial life on our planet, and suggesting establishing an official investigation body through the UN. But no policy was adopted, and he was pressed to drop the topic by British diplomats before being deposed in a coup for the following year. Some governments had taken an interest through back in 1999. Journalist Leslie King was leaked a French dossier on UFO showings. Generals and admirals believed the unexplained phenomenon could potentially be extraterrestrial. Earlier this year, for the first time in decades, the U.S. Congress publicly debated what to do about these mysterious flying objects, although there's no evidence they're of extraterrestrial origin. The mysterious inner life of the octopus. Jill Stewart, a specialist in outer space law at the London School of Economics, doesn't believe that humans will make contact with extraterrestrials within our lifetimes. But still, she thinks, considering what we would do in this situation is a conversation worth having. We search the universe to discover ourselves because it forces us to reflect back on how we relate to each other, how we relate to our environment, and how we relate to other species and people. She says these future focused scenarios may never happen, but the whole process has value in and of itself, a missing plan. There are no intentional agreements or mechanisms in place for how humanity would handle encounters with extraterrestrial intelligence, says Nicola Hedman, Executive Director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, code word UNUSA. That's not to say a framework would never exist. The UN has prime global intergovernmental organizations would be a fit for such mechanisms, he's added, but ultimately action and debate boils down to the will of member states. Currently, all international space law relates to human activity, says Hedman. The first outer space treaty was signed through the UN in 1967 by the UK, the Soviet Union, and the US in response to the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, which could reach targets in space. It serves as the basis for all existing space law, which has developed over time as new possibilities and concerns around space emerge. All five of the major space treaties, which now cover everything from the prohibition of weapons to the liability for damage and debris from spacefaring nations, center around what humans do in space and how it affects other humans. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence groups of the International Academy of Astronautics did adopt a post-detection framework in 2010, building on decades of prior debate in the case of any detection of signals from intelligent extraterrestrial life. This recommends creating a forum for international coordination through the UN and its Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, COPIUS. Stewart believes it's unlikely any widely accepted international framework will be developed until it needs to be. People like having material, real-life scenarios to consider in order to bring new ideas into law. Should contact happen, it's possible that the existing legal frameworks that govern human rights could be extended and adapted to those of aliens. One major consideration in this case would be the intent of the aliens. In short, whether they were benign and hostile. This feeds into debate over whether we should actively be attempting to contact extraterrestrials or passively looking for signals of their existence, Stewart says, an ongoing contentious question among space experts. So what would happen if a flying saucer suddenly crashed, landed somewhere on Earth? No protocols have been set out or even suggested, but hypothetically, it's possible that the country has landed and would find itself having to lead initial discussions for how to respond, says Stewart. There wouldn't be any precedent or legal background for there to be responsibility, Stewart says, adding that if a UFO had been shot down and landed in a nation state, there may be a case that the country should take responsibility for the fallout. In 2011, paper for the World Society in Super Earth Affairs, former UNUSA director Meslin Offman proposed that the interests of countries in combating the dangers of near-Earth objects i.e., asteroids, could offer model for international cooperation if the existence of extraterrestrial life or intelligence is ever established, with little in the way of agreed principles how we would collectively treat any extraterrestrials we encounter. One approach could be simply applying the rights granted to humans, fitting into the existing legal framework would make sense history. It's a reasonable assumption that any species that could travel to Earth will be of high level of intelligence and sentience and therefore should be treated akin to the humans. This could support a case for human rights to evolve in sentient rights. We would also need to take into account the various types of possible intelligence and sentience. Even on our own planet, there are all sorts of intelligence we are only just coming to recognize. The debate continues over whether octopuses, long famous for their intelligence, also have consciousness and can feel pain. The growing practice of mycology, meanwhile, indicates that some fungi show aspects of intelligence, such as having a capability to learn and engage in decision making. Incredible. When it comes to aliens, we have to ask what kind of intelligence do they have, says Susan Blackmore, writer and visiting professor at the University of Plymouth in the UK. Who researches consciousness? Why do they have it? I think we must assume these aliens would have evolved by Darwinian evolution processes. Questionable, because that's the only process we know that will produce living, intelligent things. Alien sentience. In a recounting of a supposed alien encounter in Varginha, Brazil, set out in the year 2022 UFO documentary, Moment of Contact. A story is told about a mysterious creature claimed to have been found near a crash site, clearly in some kind of physical pain. Whatever you think of the sighting, it could be a capacity for pain and suffering that might better guide our approach to affording rights to any visitor from other worlds. Could aliens suffer? Blackmore asked. If so, we should have some moral obligation toward them and perhaps even build legal frameworks on the basis of this. The Ethics of Peter Singer, who has written on the subject of inalienable right for extraterrestrials as well as animals, says that sentience would ultimately be the key consideration. Assuming that extraterrestrials, being in sentient and sense capable of experiencing pain and pleasure, and has other desires and interests, that it may take us some certain time to ascertain the fundamental ethical principle. We should apply its equal to consideration of similar interests, he says. This term, based on the concept set out by Singer back in 1979, means that all beings capable of enjoyment or suffering deserve to have their interests equally taken into account in any moral decision. That affects them. In other words, the pain of an extraterrestrial counts as much as the pain of an earthling. That's fair. The difficult issue here would be establishing what interest the extraterrestrials had, as he adds. A lot would depend on the cognitive capacities of the extraterrestrials, which may be far more advanced than those of dolphins or humans for that matter. And if they are far more advanced than our own, we may not be able to grasp what they are. The Non-Human Rights Project, a U.S. organization which aims to secure rights for non-human animals, believes the starting place for this right is autonomy, a concept valued in U.S. courts, which means an individual has the ability to choose what to do, where to go, how to act in memory of events that have previously occurred. Consciousness, meanwhile, is far too broad a category to serve as legal criterion for rights, because no one agrees on what it actually is. Today, at least in the United States, every human is born with inalienable rights to liberty, but it wasn't always the case that all humans had that right. Hence slavery, says Jake Davis, attorney at the Non-Human Rights Project. It took many years. It took a civil war and an immense amount of struggle for every human to be put on equal footing as far as the right to bodily liberty and integrity goes. Wish is that if an extraterrestrial species reached out to us and they weren't hostile, that we wouldn't just assume that they are like non-human animals, things which we could do whatever we wanted, because we are humans and they are not. My wish would be that we would evaluate them as peers to the extent that they show these capabilities, such as autonomy, and go from there. According to Lori Mariano, a former director at the Non-Human Rights Project, even intelligence and sentience are difficult concepts for our experts to agree on. They are both fuzzy concepts, she says, but I would feel confident saying intelligence is how one processes information and sentient is the ability to feel and be aware of feeling. In the case of finding multicellular organisms on another planet, provided they are moving, it's a good bet that they're intelligent and sentient, she argues. They would need some form of intelligence in order to exist at all. She suggests we should make the assumption that they are sentient and therefore capable of suffering and leave them alone. Of course, I'm not so naive to think we will, but there's morally what we should do. The idea that humans should ourselves avoid interfering with the natural development of an alien civilization itself has long history in science fiction, such as the Star Trek's Prime Directive. Although in this fictional world, the principle can be overridden with the alien species is deemed too dangerous. Similar ideas are already considered in our own world today. However, NASA's Office of Planetary Protection, NOOPP, for example, aims to protect both explored planets and Earth. If aliens can make it to our planet, though, perhaps it's not their rights we should be worried about. Seth Shostak, senior astronomer for the SETI Institute, a nonprofit research organization which aims to understand and explain the origin and nature of life in the universe, is optimistic for some contact in our lifetime, but it's important to differentiate between two kinds of contact, he says. It's more likely that we receive signals from technologically advanced civilizations that receive an alien visit. If we receive signs that there would be any great urgency because any signal we do send would take so long to arrive that we have plenty of time to be deliberate of what we say back. An alien visit, however, would mean the alien civilization has access to technology far beyond what we're capable of. When ET's pals at the last pack of the hapless creatures at the end of the blockbuster, they probably could have obliterated Earth on their way back home if they had had the inclination. If they arrived, personally, I'm going to buy a lot of frozen pizzas and head for the hills, says Shostak. If they can get here as opposed to transmitting a message, they are more advanced than we are by an enormous margin. In this case, a more appropriate question might be, would our new alien overlords afford us rights? What are you going to do if they're aggressive? Asked Shostak. It'd be like Neanderthals trying to meet with the U.S. Air Force. The Neanderthals could have all the policies they want, but it wouldn't matter. Thank you, everybody. So I wanted to make sure we did that reading on contact. I thought that'd be very interesting. What would we do, especially with this whole situation going with UFOs, UAPs, and the congressional hearing on UFOs and things like that. So I guess this was kind of, I'm curious to see what we would do. But hopefully, if they land, God willing, we'd be okay. So thanks everybody for listening tonight. I'm going to do a quick reading of that. We can have a discussion next episode if you all want. Just let me know. Comment, like, subscribe to the show. Also, I'm going to have to put it out there. I need a co-host, and I'm looking for an editor. So please, somebody contact me so we can get that started. All right. Everybody have a good evening. And this is Into the Night, Bigfoot Paranormal Talk Radio with your host, David Thundercloud. Thank you.